What's good, YouTube? Back again with another episode. Got a quick one for you all today. It's an important step, but it's pretty quick. What I'm gonna be doing today is testing the soil, and as you can see, it's a little darker outside. It's actually late afternoon, but I figure I can test the soil real quick, make a quick video, show what the process is, show the importance of testing the soil, and then I can just flip the camera around and actually do the testing inside, where I have a little bit more light. So getting right into it today, with the testing of the soil, there's really like four main things that you want to focus on with the soil. So like I've been mentioning in my previous videos, there's really three main important things that you need for a good plant. So you need access to sunlight, access to water, and then you need access to good soil or growing medium. So the things that I'm gonna test for in the growing medium today is 3 different nutrients, and then testing the pH of it. So first, I'll describe and explain exactly why all of these things are important, and they're important to know what your soil, it's important to know what the composition of your soil is and why it's important. And then I'll show a quick explanation of how I'm gonna get the samples that I'm gonna test. And then at the end, I'll show exactly how I'll test and show what my results are as well. So getting right into why it's important. So first, the pH. Without having a good pH, it doesn't matter. You're not gonna get the right nutrients to the plant. So basically what the pH measures in soil is, it measures the ability of the nutrients to dissolve itself into the soil. So technically you're not feeding the plant whenever you're giving it fertilizer. You're feeding the soil, and then the plant is eating or is feeding off of that soil. So technically you feed the soil, which feeds the plant. So with the pH, it really indicates if the pH of the soil is too acid or too alkaline, it'll hinder the plant's ability to be able to absorb those nutrients. So most plants like to be within the like 6.5 range, which is pretty neutral. I mean, a lot of plants do have like a little range of what they can still absorb depending on what the pH is, but if you kind of stick to that range, then you should be in a good spot. The next things are the actual nutrients that you want to test for. So there's really 3 main nutrients whenever it comes to plant health. You got nitrogen, you got phosphorus, and then you got potassium. And then I don't know all the chemical explanations of everything, but if you break it down to real layman's terms, the way I look at it is nitrogen is the nutrient that gives the plant its body, and then phosphorus is the thing that gives its plants its energy, and then potassium is the thing that gives the plants its strength. So getting into how you would actually acquire the sample. So you don't really need multiple tools. Here I have just 2 containers. I have 2 different garden beds, so I want to test them separately. You don't want to mix the samples up together because you won't have accurate readings, because you may have to do one thing to one garden bed or one area that you might not have to do to another. So just make sure that you have the right amount of containers for the samples that you're going to take. To the tools, all I use is the trowel and the cultivator. With the trowel, it has a pointed edge, so it's easy to dig a couple inches deep into the soil. These are the tools that you use for transplanting. It also has like inch markers on it, so you can see exactly how far you are digging. And then the other tool I'm using is a cultivator. All that does is kind of helps break up the soil and mix it together a little bit. And then I'll zoom in as well just to show how far you need to dig to take each sample. So a quick unofficial test that you can actually do is just grab a handful of your soil, squeeze it together, and see what happens. What you want to look for is something that's like real rich, darker color. It kind of sticks together, but it doesn't clump up real bad. If it doesn't do this, you probably need to add some type of compost anyway. But going into like acquiring the sample that you're going to use, so you don't want to use like the topsoil. You want to use the soil where the roots are going to be, where they're actually going to take up the nutrients. So you want to dig a couple inches deep, probably about 4 to 5 inches is fine, and then take a small sample. So like I mentioned before, you want to take multiple small samples from whatever area that you're testing, throw it into the large container, and then just take samples from all other different parts and just make one large sample. That's the sample that you'll actually piece together and test. right, so now that I've collected the soil, these are all the tools that I'll need, or the supplies that I'll need to be able to finish testing the soil. So in here you can see the 2 different samples. So that's from one garden box, and then that's from the other one, and you can tell there's a little bit of a difference even in the color of that soil. So I'm interested to see if there's a big difference between the nutrients and the pH as well. But those are just the 2 samples. This is a digital soil tester. Got it from a local garden store for about 20 bucks. And then these are the different color coded tubes and capsules based off of if you're doing a pH test, a nitrogen test, a phosphorus test, or a potassium test. So the way it's color coordinated is the green one is for a pH test, the orange one is for potassium, the blue one is for phosphorus, and then the purple one is for nitrogen. So you just want to use the right color for each one. This is just a measuring cup. The instructions ask for 1 cup of soil to 5 cups of water. So that's just a measuring cup. And then this is distilled water. You want to use distilled water instead of like tap water because distilled water is free of any minerals and nutrients, and it won't contaminate your samples in your testing. So that's pretty much all the supplies that you'll need. And then you'll just need a container big enough to be able to mix the water and mix the soil together. So first I'm gonna do the pH test. The pH test is pretty simple. All you do is you will fill this capsule up about to the first line. It's not real clear on the camera, but you'll fill it up to about the first line. And then after you fill it up, you'll take one of the green capsules, open it up, pour the powder in, and then you take the little water dropper, take some distilled water, and then you will fill up the capsule basically to the top line, and then shake it like real thoroughly. Let it settle for about 2 to 5 minutes, and then once the solid parts have settled all the way to the bottom and the water is at the top, it should have some type of green coloring. And then once that happens, and I'll show pictures of that as well, but once that happens, then you can add it to the digital soil tester, hit the pH button, and then it should give you a read on what your pH is. All right, so here you can see where the soil has settled and the water is on top. You can see it's green. That's from the powder that I added from the capsule. But now that it's settled, I can go ahead and add it into the digital soil tester. And then all I have to do is add the little capsule into this hole right here. Push it all the way down, and then for pH, I just need to hit the pH button. So it comes out to 7.0, so that's neutral right there. Like I said, 6.5, 7. That's a real safe range to be in if you're looking for a good pH to be able to absorb the nutrients. So I'm pretty safe right there. I don't have to worry about pH in the soil too much. But next what I'll do is I'll show the testing, or the results for the testing of the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium next. All right, now that we're done with the pH test, what we're gonna do next is test for the different types of nutrients, and you can pretty much do all these tests together. So what happens is, like I said in the instructions, I would just take a cup of soil, measure it in here, and then add it to a larger container, and then take a cup of the distilled water, take 5 cups of the distilled water, mix it all together, shake it vigorously, and then let it settle. Now, it'll take a lot longer to let it settle. I'll show just kind of how long it takes and then what it looks like throughout the process. But it takes a lot longer for a large container or a large amount of dirt in the water to settle. So it may be something that you have to let it sit for 30 minutes to a couple hours. But once the water is relatively clear, then the way this testing is different from the other test is you will still add the correct color coded capsule to the larger capsule, and then you would use the water dropper to fill it up to the top line, and then still you would shake vigorously again, and then you will wait probably about 10 minutes or so for the powder to completely dissolve and to completely take the color that it's supposed to take. And then once that happens, you got to just remember that the orange one is for the potassium, the blue is for phosphorus, and then the purple one is for nitrogen. You add it to the digital soil tester the same way you did with the pH tester, and then you just hit the right corresponding nutrient letter, and then in a couple minutes or in a couple seconds, it'll tell you if you have like a surplus of nutrients, you have a sufficient amount of nutrients, you have an adequate amount of nutrients, a deficiency of nutrients, or if the nutrients are completely depleted. And then, like I said, you can just kind of refer back to the owner's manual or their instruction manual to see what kind of amendments that you can add to get the nutrients up to where it need to be. So here's a quick glance or a quick look of what it looks like once I've let the water settle. So I've let the water settle. This is the mixture for the the first garden box in the soil and the water. I let that sit overnight. It's still a little bit murky, but I still let it sit for about 12 hours before I actually did the sample test. And what I did right here is the 3 different nutrients. So you got nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium right here. Had to shake it up. Just add one of these little capsules into each color coordinated one. Shake it up, and then I'm letting it sit for about 10 minutes to let that color develop. So I'll come back in about 10 minutes or so, see what it looks like, and then I'll do the test on the 3 different nutrients. All right, so it's been about 10 minutes. I've been letting the solutions, or I've been letting the sample sit so the colors can kind of develop. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and test each one by one. So like I was mentioning before, the purple is nitrogen, the blue is phosphorus, and the orange is potassium. I'm pretty confident that my nutrient levels are going to be where they need to be. They should be in the sufficient or surplus like category. I pretty much add a lot of, well, not too much, but I add compost after each growing season over the last couple years. And it's a relatively new garden box, so there shouldn't be too many issues with the nutrients. But I'm gonna test them anyway just to make sure. And then what I'll do is I'll probably just add any amendments if I need to based off of this test. But I plan on sending them off to like our agricultural department just for an official test. But I don't see there being too many issues of me having to add too many amendments right now. But we'll go ahead and start getting into the testing. So first we'll start with what is that again? That's the nitrogen. So start with the nitrogen. Add it in here. So it came out as a surplus. Another thing that I think might be kind of hindering or altering the results is the water is still a little bit murky, and I know it tests the sample based off of the color that it gives off. So I don't know if the murkiness is kind of throwing off the test, but like I said, I'm pretty confident that it still should be within the surplus and sufficient spots. But that was just for the nitrogen right there. So you see I got a surplus in that. So that's the way that you would want to test your soil. You will want to repeat and do the same thing for the other 2 nutrients. But the most important part is getting the pH right, because without a good pH, the plants won't be able to absorb the nutrients anyway. So hopefully that kind of gives a quick explanation of how to test your soil and what kind of nutrients to look for and what kind of amendments you need. If the test would have came up like depleted or deficient, I would just refer back to, let me see if I have it. I would just refer back to the instruction manual, because in the instruction manual, what it does is, based off of your test results, it'll give you some things that you can add to the soil and then how much you would need to add. So right here for the nitrogen fertilizers, you can use dried blood, that'd be like dried animal blood, nitrite of soda, bone meal, triple superphosphate for the phosphate, and then muriate of potash for potassium. And then it gives like the percentage of nitrogen in those different amendments, and then how much you would need to use per 100 square feet based off of what reading you have. So since it's at surplus or sufficient, I don't have to worry about adding any amendments right now. But if it were depleted, I may have to add like 36 ounces of dry blood per 100 square feet of soil or medium that I'm growing in. So hopefully this kind of helps and explain the importance of having a good pH on your soil, good nutrients, at least the 3 main nutrients. If you're able to get a good soil that kind of hits all of these categories, depending on what plants you're growing, then you should have a pretty healthy plant. Here's a sneak peek of what I'm going to show in next week's video, along with finally starting some seeds. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out. But until next time, peace.